were the two figures that Logain conversed with during the opening of episode 4, the Dragon Reborn, a showcase for the madness that has gripped him, or perhaps is there something a little bit more sinister at play in those scenes? We are at the halfway point of the first season of the Wheel of Time. Now, to date, we've been given 2 looks at male channelers and the subsequent madness that arrives with their use of the One Power. For each of these characters of Logain in episode 4 and the young man in episode 1, the show has decided to showcase the fate that awaits all male channelers, the madness in 2 very distinct and different ways. And it was during my watch of Logain's scenes in episode 4 with the King of Gildan where we get the introduction of what was perceived to be his manifestation of madness. But I watched it and I began to suspect we actually weren't seeing the madness that accompanies a male channeler at work there. I thought we were watching something a little bit more sinister, and with that came my suspicions that in fact we were watching TheForsaken at work there, and I came to this conclusion through 2 different avenues. One was just the dialogue that they were both using when talking to Logain in those scenes, particularly the male's last sentence.
He'll betray you. Just like your parents.
Just like your sister. None of them understand who you are. What you're going to be.
Which was really intriguing to me in the way he worded what he was saying. And then I can use the example from the first episode with the young man, because he has no real name, where he is seen to be conversing with the old man. I wish we had names for these 2, because old man and young man sound so stupid on camera. But yeah, the young man who was really alive was talking to the old man who was a manifestation of his madness. And just the way they were talking to one another was very much different from the way the 2, people or entities that were talking to Logain in episode 4. And so I felt that was another point in case which was kind of supporting my theory that we are in fact watching the Forsaken at work. And then of course, I actually have another 2 kind of points to make that will kind of back up why I think that. And I think the second one is this. I felt and feel like the Forsaken only meddle in terms of male channelers when it comes to the Dragon Reborn, particularly that early on in the book series and of course in the TV series. I think we do not see an awful lot of the Forsaken messing with random males outside of the core group in the book series of, Rand, Matt and Perrin, because at that moment in time, they were not certain which of those 3 was going to be the Dragon Reborn. And it's very much still the case in this show. They're still getting those dreams, just like they did in the Eye of the World, where they were all visited by Ishmael under the guise of Baal-Alzamon, and he, tormented them. And of course, we now have the added problem, or now it's not a problem because he's being gentle, but we had at the beginning of the episode the added problem of Logain proclaiming himself the Dragon Reborn. And so I feel that's another valid point to make. Every male that was messed around with by the Forsaken early on in the series and the show all had a connection and a chance to be the Dragon Reborn. And I think they've kept that in the show and obviously now included Logain. And that's why I do strongly believe that those 2 entities were actually Forsaken. And then my third and final point is actually an excerpt from one of the books. And I am talking about Book 7, A Crown of Swords. Now there's a particular chapter where there's a real interesting passage that happens, and I'm going to read it out to you guys because it further backs up my theory on the possibilities of those 2 being Forsaken. Through the windows she could see the brightness of early afternoon. Yet before she was halfway across her sitting room, the light suddenly faded into dim evening. The darkness did not surprise her. She turned and went to her knees immediately. Great mistress, I live to serve. A tall woman of dark shadow and silver light stood before her. Messana. Now, I think, just reading that last sentence, a tall woman of dark shadow and silver light is very much a way you could possibly describe the taint on the one power. And so I think the showrunners could have put two and two together, taken how they've adapted the taint onto the show and how it looks, visually. And of course, as we all know, they have a fantastic group of people behind the scenes that know the books inside and out. And so I would not be surprised in the slightest if they came up and found this particular passage where Messana is very much described in the same manner as the way they had actually, showcased the taint on the show, and thought, we can put two and two together here and use it as a way to introduce a couple new Forsaken into the show a little bit earlier than they are in the books. Now, yes, I am aware that this does change quite a lot from the books, but as we already know, at this point in the 4th episode, or by the end of the 4th episode, we've seen a huge number of changes already within the show that differ from the books. And so for me, I wouldn't be surprised if this was another change, because it makes sense at this point. They've already changed the moment where Nynaeve, if I'm not mistaken, channels for the first time. It's quite a dramatic change from where she channeled for that first time in the books, or at least when we read it on screen, and now of course we see it on screen in the show. We also have the examples of Mat and Perrin having different backstories. And I could go on, the introduction of a women's circle initiation ceremony, all those sorts of things, and there's many more examples. So I feel it's not that far of a stretch to suggest what I've suggested in this video, because I think all of these points and examples that I've made really back up what I have, stated in the fact that I believe the Forsaken was shown in this 4th episode. Now, as I said just a little bit ago, yes, it changes a lot from the books, but I think if we're looking at the show as a whole and where they're wanting to go, and in the introductions into certain aspects of the book series, it doesn't change too much, particularly in this first season. Yes, there might be a little bit of changes in terms of how many Forsaken are free in the world already, which is quite a differ from the book series, particularly in the Eye of the World, because at that point in time there's only one Forsaken, if I'm not mistaken, that is actually free of the boar. And of course, by the time of the end of the Eye of the World, where they make it to the Eye of the World with the Green Man, we then get the confirmation, or we find out that another 2 Forsaken had been, released or found a way out of the boar, which now made it 3 Forsaken by the end of book 1. Now, what would be the case in point with this series that we are watching on the television right now is, if those 2 entities that were taken to Logain were Forsaken, that would already make it 3. And so maybe you can have a slightly different version of events that happen in the Eye of the World in the television series, where it's just a change of how many Forsaken were already free at that point in time. But by the end of season 1 of the show, and then by the end of the first book, the number of Forsaken that are known as well, that are known to be free, will still be the 3 that we have already seen in the books. Because as we already know, the knowledge that the Aes Sedai had and everybody else in the books was very vague. They didn't actually realize there were more Forsaken free in the world and in positions of power. And so not a lot changes. It's just kind of the in-betweens and how we get to that end point in the end of the Eye of the World and in the end of the first season. And I feel it doesn't change too much in terms of that end point. So that's why I feel this whole, situation and theory that I've come up with is quite a plausible one. But yeah, I'd love to know what you guys think on this theory that I've got. I think it's quite plausible, but I'd love to know your thoughts. Do you agree with me? Do you have a slightly differing viewpoints? Or do you just downright and completely disagree on what I've spoken about in this video? Let me know in the comments down below, because I would be quite interested to see how many of you agree or disagree or partially agree. But yeah, that's the end of the video, guys. I hope you've all enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like on the video. And of course, whatever comments you do have, leave in the comment section down below. All sorts of, likes, sharing the video greatly helps, promote the channel and the video out there, because I really want to grow this channel a lot more than where it is at the moment. But yeah, thank you all for watching once again. I'll catch you all in another video at a later date.